Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. Addiction is a major challenge situation right now in our country. And with that comes perceptions of what many of us have about people who are addicted and also the way we address them, the language that we use. We're going to go over all of that today to make the recovery process even easier. And she's somebody who does make it a lot easier. Pathways to Wellness is her company. She is a spiritual and recovery coach, addiction recovery coach, and she's back with us. Debbie Peters is here. Welcome back. How are you?
Hi, good. Thank you, Steve. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you back here. And this is something that I think we really need to talk about because there's certain language that's used, there's certain perceptions, views that people have of people who are addicted, and many times they're not even on point, right?
Correct. Yeah, the way others address people who are suffering from addiction, really words can be hurtful, but words can also be changed so they're not so hurtful. It's about how someone, may identify their self and speaking in certain terms, and other people, hearing the words. It's just important that we start. I feel it's important that we start learning how to change the language and the words that we use. For instance, I'll give an example. So someone identifying someone else or maybe their self as, being dirty, or they're clean. They've maybe stopped or abstained from using a substance or substances, and they're saying I'm clean now. But the opposite of clean is dirty. So they could say that I'm working in my recovery. And recovery, just so to make this clear, that recovery is where the person is at. So I don't believe someone's recovery that they have to be 100% abstinent from a substance or substances. It's where they currently are in their life and where they want to go in their recovery, because it's a journey, it's a process, and it's not easy, for a lot of people.
How about those who are, let's say, sober from alcohol? And somebody told me this a couple of years ago, even though they were like 10, they just were coming up on their 10-year sober mark. They don't say that they're everything is, I'm trying to think of the term that they use, but basically they're still in recovery, even though they haven't touched anything, or maybe one drink at a party, and that is it. There's still a term that's used, and I guess maybe it's in recovery. Maybe they say that yeah, I'm still recovering, even though they're sober.
Right. I mean, some people identify themselves as being sober, but then, I mean, to me, if someone's in recovery, I've worked with a lot of individuals, and if someone was abstinent for say a week, sometimes they feel that they don't want to call that recovery because, quote unquote, it's only been a week. But a week is a lot. Even one day is a lot for someone who has been struggling with addiction. So, when we talk about recovery, I think it's what it means to that specific individual. If someone has been in long-term recovery, and maybe they end up having a drink or picking up and, using a substance, sometimes they consider that relapsing. Other people may consider it a slip. So, relapsing could be that they're, whatever they picked up, they're using it, say, instead of just picking it up once, maybe it's for a week or so. or people will say they went out on a binge. But I really, I people who suffer from addiction, and it's a substance use disorder, it's not abuse, because again, that sounds very, somebody's abusing a substance. I like to use the word, and we're trying to change, everyone's trying to change the language, as far as a substance use disorder. So
Let's go back over that for a second. So instead of saying that somebody was addicted or is addicted to a substance, what's the other language that's being used now?
They are diagnosed with a substance use disorder. Or the other thing too, because there are people out there that don't want that label of having a diagnosis, so they may not go into treatment. And I think, in the past I've said, you can die from withdrawing from alcohol and benzodiazepine. So, I stress to anyone who, is going to withdraw from alcohol or benzodiazepines, do not do it on your own. Seek medical attention. If anybody feels that, they really are struggling, just get help as soon as possible. I can't stress that enough.
And what a challenge too, Debbie. There's somebody who, let's say, wants to get off of a substance and, cold turkey. I don't know if that's an acceptable term, but stops, I want to stop. I want to move on, but that could impact their life by just stopping. So it's almost like a double-edged sword in some regards, unless you get help, unless you're walk through it.
Right. And when someone reaches out for help, because that's another thing that comes up, if they ask for help, people think asking for help or support is a sign of weakness. And it is so far from that. It's a sign of strength. So I feel that individuals, it's so important to think of it as a strength. And even though people may have beaten someone down because of their addiction and their behavior and everything that comes along, with suffering from an addiction, it's a sign of strength. And don't be afraid. You're not alone. And there are so many different avenues to get help and support.
Now,
the first thing is asking.
And I wanted to ask you. You've been doing this for quite some time. Do you feel that more people are comfortable in getting treatment, asking for help? Is my view in terms of the mental health situation, if you went back like 15 years, 20 years, to say that somebody has some, I got some challenges with my mental health, they'd be like, oh, this person, wow, I don't know. You wouldn't even bring it up. Now it's common to say, yeah, I was just talking to my therapist. Good for you. It's a complete
right. And that's another thing too. I think, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, but many people, I feel, would benefit from having, if you want to call it a therapist, a support team, because again, a lot of people, and this is again my opinion, I think when people heard therapy, the first thing that they thought of was like psychiatrist, medication,
right.
Hospital, like, that there was something really mentally, wrong with someone. And that is so far.
Isn't it? It right? And it's funny when you call up your friend. Hi, this is what's going on in my life. That's therapy.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Talk therapy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it depends on what an individual is struggling with.
Right.
So and again, the way things are, we live in a very stressful world right now. There's a lot of things going on. When there was COVID, people were at home. Substance use increased because stress or that's, if an individual, say, for instance, was drinking and they were working and now they're home, the drinking may have increased.
And I just want to interject here. There was alcohol delivery at that time.
I
And that, right,
Yeah,
good and bad, I guess the way it depends on how you look at it, right?
yeah. And again, I want to just stress though how important it is that everybody is an individual. So what recovery looks like for one person may look completely different to someone else.
Mm.
I years ago was speaking to someone, and again, everyone is entitled to their opinion, their own feelings. And I always would like to say it's good to agree to disagree and just to be open-minded. I remember an individual saying that if someone had one drink, they were an alcoholic.
Wow.
Now, that was their perception. Now, unless that individual, maybe if they were struggling, that's what helped keep them from picking up and drinking or using another substance. So if I said that to you, Steve, do you think if you have a drink, do you consider that person having a problem with alcohol? What would you say?
I totally disagree. One drink does not mean that that's an issue. And I'm trying to process this, but even if they had previous alcohol substance challenges, having one drink doesn't mean they still have them as long as they can stop at a certain point.
And sadly, and I've heard over and over again, for people who do have, a problem with alcohol, they can't just stop at one. They can't stop.
Well, that's different.
Um,
We're looking at one person, one drink. Are they, I hate to even use this word because we're trying to get away from it, but labeled as somebody with an alcohol abuse or substance issue? There's so many terms now. I'm losing track. I thought you
yeah, I know. And there are so many wonderful outpatient and inpatient treatment facilities. That's why if someone is really struggling, or if you know someone, you can go on, the website. I mean, there's different hospitals. I don't want that could be another whole segment as to giving the resources. But it's available. It's out there. So getting back, to some of the language, one of my pet peeves used to be when someone had to give a specimen for a drug test was again my urine was, when we got back to dirty and clean,
Mm.
it was, urine, if it's positive for a substance, it's positive. If it's negative, the drug test was negative. The drug test was positive. Not, my just how does it make you feel when you hear, my urine was dirty or my urine was clean? Like, I
Now, do you think it falls also on the person that is addicted? If they're using that language, the rest of us may use that language. And if they do, is that acceptable?
well, I think it. All right, this is getting back to my opinion again. I think it's up to that individual,
Mm.
but letting them know that there is an option to change the language. I ran a group, and one of the things, it's not, I don't hear it as often, but there are people that I've heard in the general public, oh, he's a junkie. And certain individuals needed that. I'm going to say it's negative. It's very, It's not the nicest words, but they wanted to continue to use it so they knew where they came from. But important to know there are other words to use and to identify yourself or others that have a substance use disorder. And it's also important too, like with mental health, not identifying the person as their disorder. So for instance, if someone says that person is schizophrenic, no, that person is a person with schizophrenia. They're not the word schizophrenic. They're a person. They're a human. They have schizophrenia. They have a substance use disorder. So they're not an addict, a dope head, whatever. People may disagree, and again, that's where it comes in, where everybody is entitled to their own opinions. You know, addiction, people who suffer from addiction, it affects families, it affects communities. It's just not that individual. It encompasses so much.
So I want to share a thought and see your thoughts on this, Debbie. I'm a believer in the language you use really is about your mindset. So, if you take a more positive language in your mind or even verbally, you're going to have a more positive outcome. For example, we'll digress here away from addiction. But if somebody says, I don't know, I'm never going to make any money. I'm never going to make enough. I want to buy a car. I don't know how I'm going to do it. You're probably not going to be able to make enough money because that's your mindset. You're going to derail yourself. You don't even know you're doing it. It's your subconscious taking over, saying, "Oh yeah, he's saying he can't make enough money. Let's support that." And this goes back. It's proven in science, all of that.
Absolutely.
If somebody's using the term dirty, and I get it, it's been around for decades. You watch a movie, you'll see that term used. But I believe that it's creating a certain perception in your own mind if you are somebody who is addicted and recovering, that it's right away you're putting a negative on yourself where it should be a positive, like, wow, I made it another week. This is good. I'm moving forward. To use the word dirty and other terms like that just kind of is like a weight that's pulling you down. I hope that makes sense.
It makes 110% sense. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's so hard, especially if someone has been suffering, and dealing with this for a long time. And like I was saying, be just beaten down and beaten down. There's the self-esteem is low. Their self-respect may be low. And that's where, recovery coaching and or treatment comes in, because it's supporting. So as a coach, I don't tell people what to do. I meet them where they're at. I find out, what does recovery look like for them, where they want to go, where do they see, and support them on their journey. Should I, if I got a sense that someone really needed to go, into detox, of course I'm going to say, look, this is something you should highly consider, but I can't drag them there. I can support them and show, and we can talk about what would it look like if you did, get help. Where do you want to be? So it's it's a process. It doesn't, all this doesn't go away overnight. But I think, as we were talking about before, asking for help, knowing that help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Each and every person is individual and deserves to know, like you were talking about before, with feeling good in one day, 1 minute. Mm-hmm. Certain people, if they can abstain, stop using whatever their drug of choice or, drugs of choice are, that 1 minute could be huge.
Sure.
So it's different for every individual.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? We have a few minutes left. I want to talk, if we could, about the beginning steps. Who comes to you? Is it usually a family member that reaches out to you? Is it usually the individual that wants to have addiction recovery coaching?
It's usually the individual.
Okay.
Because recovery coaching is now gaining the again, going back, it was going into treatment, whether it was outpatient or inpatient, but recovery coaching is becoming more recognized
How would you do it?
because
I'm sorry.
sure,
Can we define it? I don't think we've defined it yet.
defined.
Addiction recovery coaching. It's different than um, other,
Right.
right?
So my training, because there are people who specialize in, say, coaching and supporting people who have an eating disorder. I've worked in the field of, substance use disorders for, let's see, like about 6, 7 years now. So it's people who suffer from a substance use disorder. And again, what that looks like for the individual. So someone might come to me or someone else and say, I'm drinking a 6 pack of beer a night. I really want to get it down to, I need to stop, but maybe I can only get it down to one. So it's supporting them on where they want to be and what recovery looks like for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what level would they be at where they would reach out to you? Would there be, in terms of, I'm going hypothetical here, but in terms of how much they're drinking or how addicted they are, would it be a certain level where you can only help them to a certain point, then they take it to another level in terms of treatment, call it treatment?
Okay. So I'm I'm trying to see how I can answer that question. Um because everybody's added, again, depending on where they are, maybe they have already they've completed treatment and
Okay.
they need that additional support.
That's it.
They completed treatment and now they're like, okay, I really don't want to go to meetings, but I need someone to talk to, it could a weekly basis, a month. It's meeting with that individual and really finding out what their specific need is.
Gotcha.
So, someone came to me and they were, drinking a case of beer a night, and they've been doing that for the last 6 months. I would highly recommend that they seek treatment first because they're going to need to detox. You can't just stop drinking that much alcohol
Right.
without going into some sort of withdrawal.
And that's where I was going with that. So they would be reaching out to you after they've gone through some kind of treatment, unless I could be wrong here, unless their addiction issue isn't somewhat extreme, where they're just, it's kind of manageable, but they really want to
Right.
not.
And that's where I would speak to them because I might not be the right fit for them
Sure.
either. That's another thing. That's why I have a 15-minute free discovery session so I can find out, because maybe somebody doesn't like my style or the way I speak, or maybe, again, it's an individual that I know that I'm not going to be able to give them the service that they truly need.
Sure. So I'm glad we talked about this because there's a lot of clarity here, and especially the perceptions that we have of people trying to recover, trying to get through all of this, and the language, it can be very negative, and it should be a positive thing. You're taking a step to improve your life and the life of those around you. Debbie, how do we find you?
So my website is pathwaysforwellness.com. And my email is info@pathwaysforwellness.com. Phone number 631-926-2362.
Appreciate you being here. You have just a very genuine way about you. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I really feel that in terms of helping people, your passion is there, and that shines through not only the passion, but the genuineness of you. And I think that's what gets people, motivated and moving forward. It's like you're talking to a friend.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here, and look forward next time we talk.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.